Adolescence. Yeah, folks, this is the first Netflix show I'm talking about in a very long time. I have a lot of issues with Netflix. I've made them very public in other videos talking about kind of the streaming era of television. But that's just where we are. Stuff exists on streaming. And contrary to what I thought and what a lot of people think, sometimes, on occasion, a very good product that means something and is worthwhile can come out on a streaming service like Netflix. A couple years ago, we had Baby Reindeer, a very topical and timely story about obsession and trauma and what hurts you. And I think that show is very interesting. In a very topical and of the moment sense as well, we have a new show from Netflix from Philip Barantini, who is the director of the majority of these episodes, Adolescence, which is a 4-episode miniseries. This is now released on Netflix. All episodes are available. That is the thing that Netflix does. And I only went into this show because of the discourse around it. Everybody who I follow online and the people I trust to talk about this stuff was very positive and successful and like, this is how you do it. This is a good show with something to say. It is worth exploring and checking out. So word of mouth is really positive, and I just want to see something that's going to make me think. It feels like it's been a while for that in terms of like Netflix stuff in particular. So what do you got for me? I watched all of this show in one sitting, which is something I rarely do. I don't like doing that, but I think that is how you're supposed to absorb this show in particular, is to take every single angle and feeling in at once and let every single side resonate with you in one completely dystopic and distressing sequence. This show, oh man, is it just a powerhouse of sit with this thought, don't let go of this, let this just absorb into your skin and make you feel uneasy. It is kind of amazing in how it handles that and how it presents that. It makes me so uncomfortable, and I think it is one of the few shows, if not the only show in recent time, that has made me go, this is what's scary about being young today. In a very, very distraught way. I was like, oh my god, I'm so happy that I grew up in the era I did. And there was their own issues here and there. I'm a man in his late 20s. A lot of dangerous stuff was happening at the time I was going there too, and the way the internet worked was so different. But I just can't imagine the children today, the young people today who are like 12 to 17, who have this type of content being thrown in their faces and this worldview being put in their faces. So Adolescence is about this young boy. He is 13 years old and he is accused of murder. And the first episode follows his journey being taken into custody by the police, the first hours leading to what's happening to him, and then the subsequent episodes show different time periods resulting in that. It's 4 episodes. Each of them is kind of like their own contained story about different angles that lead into this whole case. So the first episode, the boy gets taken into custody. The second episode, the police go to his school to investigate. The third episode is him speaking with like a therapist and psychiatrist about like what he's feeling. And the fourth and final episode is about the ramifications of his potential actions towards his family, and how his family has to deal with the stuff that this kid may or may not have been involved in. Now, the gimmick, if you can call it a gimmick for each episode, is that each episode is shot in one continuous take. So there is no breaks in terms of the camera movement. There is no cutting for the entire 60-minute runtime in some cases. That in itself is an impressive feat. Whenever a show does that or attempts to do that, it is one of the most interesting things a show can do. That is hard to accomplish in something this big and this real and scary. That is hard to do. The show does it flawlessly, which is super cool to see, super impressive to have that go on there, especially when it feels like the camera is just wandering through these locations. Very naturalistic, like now we're just going to fade out here, push in this way, and go to this new story that's happening in this moment. That I can't think like that in terms of my direction or cinematography, so when someone actually accomplishes that well, it's very impressive. On a technical level, this is unparalleled in terms of stuff we are seeing today. It is truly, truly gorgeous and special. And I can't imagine being an actor and working through some of these situations. Like in the final episode, there's just a sequence where like they're driving a van for 6 minutes. And I'm like, holy shit. That's just happening as we're watching it. That's really hard. But those are the moments that this is trying to capture, is the things in between the takes that you'd see when the camera is like cutting away. Just hang on to this. Look at this. See how we're reacting in real time to the stuff happening around us. Man, is it crazy. So, I don't know how to really gauge some of this show other than you have to watch it to truly understand what it is saying. It is a lot of just fucking intense feeling. I am not a parent, and I am not somebody who works in an academic system who has to spend a lot of time with young people. My job does not require me to spend a lot of time with young people, but I know teachers. I know people with young kids. I can culturally understand and emotionally understand how being a parent or being a teacher in today's day and age, if these types of kids and this generation, can be stressful to see the things that they absorb and all that stuff. And this show is just a perfect example of like opening up those conversations and taking a deeper look at the way children behave and feel today. And no other show has done that yet, in my opinion. Like, no other show has really spoken to how this generation of young people feel and think and can be manipulated. And look, every generation gets manipulated by the stuff that they absorb. The popular culture at large has this way of just permeating in you and making you think about certain things. That's definitely the case for me and my generation growing up, and the one before that and before that. But what I'll say about this generation, the children who are now in middle school or high school right now, I think there's just so much more content online that is just easily available to you. How many shows of today are going to reference the Manosphere, Andrew Tate, 80-20 stuff, and have that be a sticking point for how a young man is supposed to feel psychologically? How does he feel towards women? How does he feel towards his dad and his parents and being popular and beloved? I think that is such an important factor to this show, because I know people who are teachers, and you hear that stuff come up. That is not something that isn't happening. That is happening. Those conversations are happening. Young men are having these thoughts and these feelings, and it's just hard to understand, especially when you're that age, that some of that is wrong and abusive and destructive and just inappropriate. So when this is an entire story about like a young man who has been called these things and absorbed these things, and his whole worldview is, I want people to think I'm cool, I want girls to like me. How do these things motivate you? Not even just in terms of the alleged murder, but in terms of your family and the things that you're seeing here being called important impact the views of your own father. And it's true. It's scary. It is scary. Like how this can happen and how this is a thing that is likely to happen multiple times over. So we'll go through kind of like what each episode is about. I will say there isn't a bad performance in the bunch. I think all the kids at the school are very interesting. I think Erin Doherty, who plays the psychiatrist in episode 3, we'll talk about her more in a bit. That's incredible. But the breakout here is Owen Cooper. He's the young boy who is Jamie. He's the through line. He's the kid who is accused of murder. And what he has to do is play every single angle. The helpless to in control to demanding to broken. And this is his first big role. And I think he's the best actor on the show. And we got some fucking legendary actors on this show, especially some playing his father. The way he handles himself, presents himself, and commands every sequence, even when he's playing weak, it is insane. It is insane what he is doing for such a young guy. You have captured the essence of this generation so well, because you are this generation. You are so loud and abrasive, and you think you know best, and you're going to make jokes and be silly. You're going to talk shit about women or people who look differently than you and just have it be like, I want to look popular online, I want to be popular in the moment. But as soon as an adult calls you out on your bullshit, you're going to get scared and frightened until it is a woman who you can physically say you are stronger than because of your outlandish and loud behavior. And I'm like, fuck, dude, that is so scary. It's so earnest. I think the big other performance in this show is Stephen Graham, who, he's an actor you love. You've seen him in so much. And it's hard to say if this is his best work, but the final episode of him, we'll get to it, like the final episode of him, that is the most brutal thing I've seen an actor do in a very long time. I think putting yourself in that mindset, especially when the show is about one continuous take, that is hard to pull off authentically. So the first episode is all about the cops that arrest him and taking him into custody, having your ID taken and your fingerprints taken and being strip searched, and how you're not really like talking with your parents, and how you can have like one adult present in your life while you're going through all this stuff, and the events like, here's like your caseworker on this situation, all that stuff. I think it's my favorite episode just because I really like the bureaucracy of it all, and the pacing of that is so interesting. Cop stuff makes me very uncomfortable, especially like modern cop stuff. And I felt like this is just a bunch of people talking around what's happening until you sit them down in a room and you yell at a child. And that made me more uncomfortable. Look, the entire thing made me uncomfortable, but that stuff just, you are police, and you're trying to do the right thing, but you are attacking this young guy, regardless of who he is and how he behaves. That's a very uncomfortable position to be in. And just like the final couple minutes of that, you just realize like, oh, you are treating this kid how he should be treated, but that is still very harsh. It's scary. And I think it's just so well handled. And the actors that play the cops, I think they are just incredible and are asked to do a lot of just, every single person who sees you in this is going to hate you. How do you work around that? And then that dovetails perfectly into episode 2, which is about these same police officers going to the school and trying to talk to some of the students and the friends of Jamie. This episode is scary. And I think a big part of that is just how every adult feels indifferent to a lot of the stuff going on. Like, if these kids aren't willing to participate, how do we make them feel anything in this situation? That's very scary. And I think a part of that comes to the generational divide, and I don't want to get too deep into the weeds on this part, but there are studies in cases you can see, and there's smarter people than me that can talk about this stuff. Is the change in the generation like the active or the passive generation? So the generation that your parents were is different than you, and then your kids would be different than that. So maybe the generation that is between you and your parents are going to be more alike than the generation that you're a part of it. And that goes into a bunch of different ways. You know, it's more than just like the baby boomer and the Gen Xer to millennial stuff. It's kind of going between that into like the generation of the 60s to the 70s to the 80s to the 90s and the 2000s and that kind of stuff. And I think a clear divide of like the older generation that grew up before the internet, before the iPhone generation where everything was available at your fingertip and you could watch videos across the world from a million different people spewing their nonsense onto a 10-second platform for you to learn stuff. I think this show really clearly shows you that in the school. The attention spans of these kids have changed. Their priorities have changed. The way they think and feel have changed. And every one of them wants to be popular and infamous and regarded by their peers and the opposite sex. And that is a very prominent case for a lot of young males in particular. And this episode really deals into that. How the older generation, like the cops, don't understand the dialogue being said, and how Jamie's behavior and how people are talking about him leads them to think that he's an incel. And I'm like, that is probably there. And I think it's very scary. I also think one of the best things the show does is not specifically give you an answer, because Jamie gets defensive and offensive about a lot of the stuff people say about him. but it never straight up says, like, this is how he is. This is what he believes in. They're just things that he sees constantly. Whether he likes it or not, he gets that information absorbed into him, which is terrifying in its own right. I can't even imagine being a teacher in the modern school system. It sounds like a fucking nightmare. And I don't know how, like, the UK system works differently or the British system works differently, but here in Canada, like, no thank you. No thank you. It sounds terrifying. Episode 3, we get the child psychologist, who is Aaron Doherty, talking with Jamie. That's the whole episode, is them in one room. Practically, we leave a couple of times here and there. But moving a camera around a singular room while two people talk about each other and talk to each other, I don't know how you accomplish that, but you do. Truly terrifying, truly just sad, watching this woman realize this kid is desperate and he is angry, and if she reacts in a way that just slightly goes to his favor, he is going to lock on to that and be like, oh, you are just a pathetic woman. I can have power over you. Whether it's intentional or unintentional for Jamie to do that, that is the thing that this show is about, is because these people he can see online saying these things are possible, he thinks they're possible. The severity doesn't really set in. Terrifying episode, absolutely wonderful to see. And then episode 4 is about his parents and sister dealing with it, more about his father, which I think really, that also is where I'm like, this is what it's about. Maybe because I'm older and I'm not in school anymore, I can relate more to the parental side of things. There's a sequence towards the end of the last episode where it's Stephen Graham talking to the actress that plays his wife, and they're sitting in their room, and he's like, I didn't want to become my father, and I think that has affected how my son is. And I just think that is so powerful. And I think it's going to mess up a lot of young men watching this show, because you just don't realize it till it happens. The stuff you're trying to do could be harming them. And it's just, that's the gamble of being a parent and letting your kids have freedom. And just having freedom is like, you just never know what's going to affect you. I think it's brilliant. I really do. I'm getting really upset thinking about the show, which is really cool. And I've liked other shows more this year. I think Severance is a well-made show that's better than this. But what this show did, it really speaks to so much of today and how things are really bad today and can destroy you today. And the idea of, like, adolescence being the theme of this show, and how things change and shift over time. And you have to grow up fast because you're just constantly inundated with stuff that you can think about. I think it's scary, and it's really intense. And the show's really important to watch. I think it is. I think it's very important to watch and well worth your time. God, what a production that this put out. So, Adolescence, I am going to give a 9 out of 10. Now, thank you all for watching this review. Be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. As always, you can check me out on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And of course, I will catch you in the next one. Have fun. Stay safe. Good luck. I mean it.